Hey there, Sean Corbett, True West Realty Group. I wanted to do a second part to a topic that's pretty new in real estate right now. It has to do with assumable loans. And the first time I went through and did this, it was really to kind of describe what assumable loans are in general and really how it affects the seller in promoting and selling their property. And I talk about the good things and some of the negative things that you need to make sure you're aware of on how it works. So I did that in part one. This is part two. And specifically, what I want to talk about here is for the benefit of the buyer and how it can help them be a really good option in kind of this time period where the interest rates have gone up or they're not able to afford it because their payment's too high. There's some really good techniques that can be kind of put into their buying process that might be able to help him. So specifically, I want to talk about the buyer in this video. First, I want to talk about some of the benefits that's available to the buyer. The most obvious is interest rates, in the market today are, I think, as low as high fives, sixes, up until about mid sevens, depending on your credit score. And most of you probably know in the last 4 to 5 years, interest rates had come down to even into the twos. And sometimes, you'll find those in the threes as well. And that allows buyers to maybe look at taking on a home that was bought during that time period and benefit from that much lower interest rate than what's available to them today. Even better than some of the builders out there offering some really big incentives. So that's a really good reason to consider it. It'll obviously have a direct impact on your mortgage monthly payment, considerable impact. So if you're talking, 3-4%, in a $400,000 house, that can be as, a $500-700 a month swing. So that's pretty substantial. In doing it, there's little to no additional cost to the buyer because the loan's already in place. Okay, you're not going to have origination fees. You're not going to have, you might have some minor processing fees that the bank will pass through to the buyer for the cost of doing it. You don't need an appraisal. Survey should have already been bought with the property, is probably held and retained by the lender as well, so you shouldn't need a survey. Title is going to likely be clear. So all those things, because the lender will find out if they have liens and things getting attached to the property that they currently own. So title should also be clear. There shouldn't be really any major lender conditions to the buyer. So getting it from start to finish, as long as the buyer's credit and DTI look pretty good, generally it's a pretty clean process from that point. And the last thing is there shouldn't be really any lender conditions on the actual home. If you buy a home that's older and you go FHA and the wood rot and the floors aren't installed or foundation issues, all of a sudden all this stuff comes up and the lender now has to get involved in getting it addressed. Well, in an assumable, you don't need to do any of that because the loan's already in place. So a lot of things you can kind of work through and overcome pretty quick. So the things I really want you to think about in considerations of getting this is the buyer would need to cover the equity shortage. That's your number one challenge. Okay, so for example, if the sales price is $300,000 and the loan is $200 for the payoff, that buyer would literally need to cover the $100,000 shortage in order to move forward. That's usually the biggest barrier to entry, is covering that equity shortage in order to move forward. And the other thing is it can currently take a lot longer to close. Traditional financing on most of my loans I can see 3 to 4 weeks, pretty consistent. The last couple of assumable loans that I've closed, one of them took about 40 days-ish, and the other one, and that's us like all in pushing. And then the other one I just closed was more than 60 days. And, it was starting to get to that frustrating, period when you get that far out, because you got to make your life decisions on whether you own the home and can move forward, moving in or not. So that's something you need to make sure you take in consideration. And keep in mind, many banks right now are really not set up to handle these type of loans in-house. Like they've got it, they offer it, and now they got to deal with the assumable product. They do a very small amount of percentage of these, so they don't have a lot of isolated departments to kind of handle and address it. So keep that in mind, that they may ask a lot of redundant questions, repetitive questions. They have different departments asking different questions and they're not talking to each other. For example, both of my transactions that I just closed, neither one of them, they both had a seller talking to one part of the bank and the buyer talking to another part of the bank. So they're not even on the same page with some of that. So that's another thing that you have to kind of just give them some grace with getting them through from start to finish. Let's see, what else do I have? So although many sellers have the options to offer Assumable in their current home, they do have the ability to offer it. Many of them don't know it. So what happens is in the real world, in the real marketplace, there's very few listed in the MLS. For example, let's say we've got 4,000 listings in the Dallas-Fort Worth MLS. I would say there's probably less than 100 that are listed with an Assumable option. So you almost have to see the house you like and maybe you just have that conversation. That's some of the value add you have with good agents, is that they're willing to call and talk with a target home and say, hey, you haven't sold it, you have an FHA loan on it, I know FHA allows for Assumable. Do you mind looking into and allowing us to do an Assumable on your low interest rate to make this an attractive offer to my buyer? So all those are really clever strategies and techniques. You got more questions on how any of this works? I've got a pretty good handle on the Assumable market. Feel free to reach out to me directly, and definitely follow me on YouTube to continue to get more content just like this. I appreciate it. Thank you.